Today we're at Kettering Conference Centre, and today we're here to celebrate Safeguarding Week, and the Self-Neglect Conference is part of Safeguarding Week. So it's a series of events across Northamptonshire. It's the first Safeguarding Week ever in Northamptonshire, and today we're going to talk about neglect and self-neglect. Safeguarding Week is to raise awareness across not only for professionals but the general public as well. Neglect and self-neglect are both very complex subject areas, and the objectives today is to, one, bring both areas together. So we're thinking of think family, so we're not just thinking about adults or children, we're thinking about families. It's a very complex area. It is something that was identified through a recent serious case review in Northamptonshire. And so the aim of today is to give practitioners some tools to enhance their practice. If practice is enhanced, then obviously that will be more positive outcomes for children, young people and their families. We've got a wide range of professionals attending today, ranging from health visitors and midwives, social workers, safeguarding leads and people from the voluntary sector. So it's for people to get together. We have got, what we're doing is in each of the afternoons and the morning sessions, we're looking at the subject matter generally. So we're doing a general overview of neglect, a general overview of self-neglect, and then we're bringing it together to say what can we do to enhance practice. So what are the local things we can do? So toolkits to help practitioners work with young people, children and their families. My objectives for today for practitioners is that, one, they're going to be refreshed or they're going to gain new knowledge about the subject matter, so whether that's neglect or self-neglect. And then the second aspect is that they're going to take away having more understanding what's happening at a local level, and they're going to have the tools to identify neglect or self-neglect, because at times they are very difficult to identify within practice. In terms of Northamptonshire, I don't think our numbers are higher or lower in terms of referrals for neglect. However, the commonality is that neglect is the most common reason for a referral into children's services. From today, what I want people to be very clear of is that in the past we have thought about safeguarding children and we've thought about safeguarding adults. Today it's bringing a wealth of professionals in the same room who've got an interest in perhaps in one, but what we're trying to do is bring them together to think about a think family approach rather than children and young people or adults. We want people to really home in about families.
Neglect has been the topic of many serious case reviews and learning reviews, both locally and nationally. And I had a personal real reminder just yesterday of the need for us to be really vigilant and to work across agencies. In another place altogether, I've been involved in a very serious neglect of a 7-year-old girl, which will be in the national press quite soon, and a level of neglect that I personally haven't seen. It was almost Dickensian, and that was a real reminder to me, and it should be to all of us, that we need to be centred on this. We need to be really aware of looking for patterns of neglect, and not just looking at one-off events. We need to be linking events in a children's life and a family's life. So we're collecting histories, we're looking at chronologies, and learning what life is like for a child or a young person in the various settings. It's important that we make links between children and adult services, and that's why we're holding the two conferences on one day. And we are attempting, as the two safeguarding boards, to work together and to think family in everything we do. This morning's session will be centred on two things. Firstly, a presentation from Sawyer from Barnardos, which is going to give us a background to neglect, what it is, how we detect it and what we do about it. Later in the morning we'll be launching the new Neglect Toolkit. This is a very important new approach which we will be encouraging all partners and all agencies to be deploying in their work with children.
I lead the Early Help and Prevention Service run by Northamptonshire County Council, which is a county-wide service of teams of practitioners who work with children and families who are experiencing difficulties. So we go into families, offer them support, offer interventions that help people parent better and improve outcomes for children.
My role is a senior practitioner in early help and prevention. That role is to support practitioners in delivering support to the families within Northamptonshire that are experiencing those difficulties.
But we're here today to launch the Northamptonshire Neglect Toolkit, which has been produced to support practitioners working with families, helping them identify neglect, understand it, and to know what to do when they encounter it in the families they work with. We're also here to talk about the graded care profile, which is the new neglect assessment tool that's being made available to everybody to improve the way we work with children who are being neglected. The toolkit's a set of resources for practitioners that's been developed over about a 6-month period by a multi-professional group, so representation from lots of different agencies that work with children. And it's a series of information, of research, of learning from serious case reviews, and of tools that practitioners can use to help them identify neglect and to understand the causes of it when they work with families. I think one of the difficulties is that sometimes you just see a partial picture. You might just see one cause for concern in your interaction with a family. You don't really know what the rest of that child's lived experience is. So it's really helpful to be able to assess the situation in the family and in the home to understand if what you've seen is just a small part of that family's life or if actually there are more widespread problems. It's aimed at all professionals who come into contact with children and families, people from health professions, from the police, from education, but it's also aimed at people working with adults who may well encounter children in their day-to-day work, so adult mental health professionals or housing officers, people who may see what's happening for children and be the only person actually who's aware of what's happening for a child and then needs to be able to assess and make sure that child gets the right support.
So my role here at the conference centre today as part of the launch of the toolkit is to provide colleagues with an example of a case that's been worked within early help and prevention. It's a case where the toolkit was used to make an assessment using the graded care profile. In addition, I'm able to give oversight of how the outcomes of the graded care profile made impact on that family's life and improved outcomes for the children and ensured that they were able to achieve their maximum potential in life. The importance of the toolkit is to be able to measure the different areas of need within the family and to be able to share that with the family and to support them in identifying their own needs and empowering them to identify the changes. So the assessment has enabled us to work with the family not only to identify the needs that they have, but also to be able to put measures onto that so that the family can be aware of the journey that they need to undertake and the support that we as a service can provide to them to be able to achieve the outcomes. At the end of the journey, we're able to measure the progress that has been made, and that supports the family in identifying how they need to continue with the changes that they've made. In this scenario, it definitely had a positive impact. Sometimes the impact that we see is not a great one, and then that's why the assessment supports us, because sometimes it's the small changes that actually make the greatest difference, and the assessment helps us to identify those.
We'd like people to take away from today a greater awareness of the indicators of neglect and the signs of neglect in children, and also to feel more confident that they know what to do when they do encounter children in difficulties. We know that nationally, neglect is the most likely reason for a child to end up on a child protection plan. We also know that the longer children are neglected, the more harm is done to them. So it's really important that all professionals can identify neglect as early as possible to try to make things better for those children.
I'm Emma Sawyer. I'm a training consultant for Barnardos. As you know, we're a major children's charity that provide all kinds of direct work services to children across the country. My role within Barnardos is I'm part of a core team of trainers who provide all the training for internal staff at Barnardos, but also for all externally commissioned training. And we also provide consultancy to aid service improvement for people externally as well. So in all areas of work with children and families, so from kind of specialist child protection subjects like radicalisation or extremism or child sexual exploitation, sexually harmful behaviour, through to kind of standard child protection courses at all levels. The work on neglect and trying to tackle it and trying to better, enable ourselves to respond better to it, it is something that we constantly grapple with, and we see in training people across the country that the will is there, and I think there's a heightened awareness. I think a lot of people recognise the signs and symptoms of neglect now, but I think that we still struggle with how to keep that overview over time and not just kind of look at things as single incidents and snapshots, but how do we take responsibility when perhaps the systems and the pressures around us kind of push us to try and do things in a quick way, actually that ends up causing delay and drift, and for children's needs not to be met, and the pervasive harm that they can suffer, it kind of is allowed to carry on if we fail to get to grips with assessments and in a historical context, and really try and track those incidents of concern and not just kind of let go as soon as things improve, but see, look at how change can be sustained and really target what we're doing to enable that. So I think persistence is really key, but and also holding on to the fact that neglect is something that has a negative impact on a child's development over time. But I think even with that definition, the reality, the day-to-day experience of a child is very hard to measure and evidence at what point their development is being harmed, and actually it's a kind of drip cumulative slow process often, without those kind of dramatic incidents that usually give rise to referrals and a decisive intervention. So there's something about us needing to be very skilled and our assessment being grounded in a good understanding of child development to understand actually how that process over time affects that child's life chances. And I think in the less obvious cases, I think people can be quite unsure of themselves, and understandably, because they don't want to make judgments, they're not sure where it fits with other information or if it's enough. I often hear people say, for example, in schools or children's centres, well, we weren't sure that, we thought that wouldn't, if we made a referral about that wouldn't be enough. But I think what people need to really hold on to is it's okay to pass on a concern, and nothing, you're not going to look silly, what's to be lost really from pooling all the information we have, because what we do know is that often, had all the information been put together, and we hear this from serious case reviews, the threshold was more than met, but people hadn't pieced those things together or pieced them together over time and seen that actually these accumulate. So I think people need to, with that uncertainty they feel, still kind of have the courage to discuss it with their colleagues, make referrals, initiate early help assessments, whatever they feel is appropriate, and not be afraid to say, I'm concerned, but I'm not sure about the impact here. I'm not sure if the threshold's met, but I want, I need to share this with my colleagues, because the more sharing that we do, and the more we'll enable each other to collect those proper pictures of the child's experience, which is what we so often lack. Barnardos tries to raise awareness wherever it can, so it's a campaigning organisation and has a high profile. And in all our dealings with people, whether we're providing a service, working in a Barnardos shop, or a trainer like myself, we take opportunities to kind of represent and promote the needs of vulnerable children. And I think children that are neglected are one of the the kind of most commonly occurring group of maltreated children, and absolutely what Barnardos is about. And believe it, Barnardos is very much talks about believing in children and believing that it's never too late. You know, whatever situation someone's in, there are things that can be done to support them and promote their welfare, and absolutely neglect just is the heart of what we do and what we're passionate about, really. I think the fact that today accompanies the introduction of the Neglect Toolkit and the launch of the graded care profile as a tool to be used locally. I hope people go away from today feeling that actually collectively there's a move in the right direction in terms of working together and having the support in place to make the best judgments and decisions together. And I also hope, I suppose, in terms of what I brought today and what I really would like people to take away is around the voice of the child, and I'm really thinking about, have we done all we can? Is there more we can do? You know, in line with the things I said about what children want from professionals, to get at that voice. Even if it's a tiny baby and all we've got is observation, as in the film that we saw. Just making sure that we go that extra mile to get that child's voice, because I think when that's missing, our chances of successful intervention often are reduced. I think the toolkit's going to be really helpful, and from what, you know, from my experience of meeting with and training and working with practitioners across the country and across England, Wales, I see that, you know, where they're supported by something like a toolkit, methods, collective methods, a common language locally, that really facilitates better conversations and working together between the professionals locally, so that can only be a good thing. The work on neglect and trying to tackle it and trying to better, you know, enable ourselves to respond better to it, it is something that we constantly grapple with, and we see in training people across the country that the will is there, and I think there's a heightened awareness. I think a lot of people recognise the signs and symptoms of neglect now, but I think that we still struggle with how to maintain, how to keep that overview over time and not just kind of look at things as single incidents and snapshots, but how do we take responsibility when perhaps the systems and the pressures around us, you know, kind of push us to try and do things in a quick way, actually that ends up, you know, causing delay and drift, and for children's needs not to be met, and the pervasive harm that they can suffer, it kind of is allowed to carry on if we fail to get to grips with assessments and in a historical context, and really try and you know, track those incidents of concern and not just kind of let go as soon as things improve, but see, you know, look at how change can be sustained and really target what we're doing to enable that.